Complexity, the state or quality of being intricate or complicated. Very cool. But how does complexity manifest itself in art? Well, it's something that I've been asking myself lately when looking at contemporary artworks, old artworks, and even my own artworks, and trying to see whether they possess this quality and whether or not they should even have this quality to begin with. How much is too much? So I've decided to make a new art piece while trying to explore this very topic, trying to figure out the meaning and value of complexity, and to see by the end of this video the answer to all of my questions.
And as I finish this piece, we're excited to announce our very first print drop, Mindsets. It will include this drawing along with 2 others I created this past month. So make sure to sign up for our mailing list to get early access when the sale goes live. Link is in our profile.
Now, first and foremost, when I think of complexity, I try to differentiate between quantity of detail and quality of detail that is implemented in any given art piece. The difference between being noisy and being intricate can be a little tricky to distinguish because oftentimes they both might seem like the same thing. For example, let's take Aeneas and the Sibyl in the Underground by Jean Brulé the Younger. It's a highly complex piece of work, filled to the brim with a wide cast of characters roaming the plains of the underworld. All of it is overwhelming for the eye to capture all at once. The composition leads the observer from the left to right in a downward arched way, taking them on a long and arduous journey through this hellscape of an environment. It's quite a lot to take in, very noisy and chaotic, yet executed with intricacy, high level of detail and precision if you pay attention to the figures and the landscapes drawn in this masterpiece. It's a delicate balancing act to pull off if you want to make art of this type of quality. But of course, you might be asking quite reasonably, is this the only way to integrate complexity within my artwork? Oh, what do you think? Of course not, you silly, willy-nilly, hillbilly
goober.
We can look at someone like Carlo Cara's funeral of the anarchist Galli. It has a lot going on in and of itself, and the manner in which the violence and the chaos of this event is depicted is quite expressive. Not as polished as the previous example, and arguably this is done on purpose in order to emphasize the feeling of chaos, with jagged shapes and lines that clash and battle with one another with dark and contrasting color palette. So when I sit down and start to sketch my drawing, I try and keep in mind these methods of expression, and depending on what I want to express, I can manipulate my manner of drawing to accurately portray my vision and emotion. But those are just tools of expression. What about the content itself? I could just draw a self-portrait of myself using highly complex shading techniques and dynamic shapes and end up with a pretty complex piece of work. But is that enough? What about a narrative that can be told through artwork, like with The Death of Socrates by Jacques-Louis David? This is a depiction of an iconic moment known to us from our history. And in this piece, there are multiple observers of Socrates committing to his ideals and beliefs while accepting the chalice with the poison hemlock. There's grief, worry, confidence, acceptance. So much is going on in this piece that another YouTube channel named Nerdwriter has a video published about this single piece alone. So this brings me back to my working process. And now I'm wondering about not only how do I want to execute my work, but what do I want to execute and how much of what I want can I fit within a single piece? You know, the funny thing about creating a complex drawing such as this is that you don't really notice how much it takes out of you until it's too late. You tell yourself, just one more line, just one more detail, and before you know it, it's 3 a.m., your back hurts, and your brain feels like it's been wrung out. I think a lot of artists go through this. You get stuck in your work so much that the rest of life sort of disappears. And at first it feels like passion, like dedication, but sometimes it's just burnout slowly creeping in until you realize. You know, I had days where finishing a drawing felt less like creating and more like dragging myself across a finish line. So I've lately been thinking about how important it actually is to take care of your mental health and not just your art. Which is why I want to thank BetterHelp for sponsoring this video. BetterHelp makes it easier to get started with therapy. You just fill out a questionnaire and you can be matched with a therapist in as little as a couple of days. And if it's not the right fit, you can switch at any time at no extra cost. The important thing is that a therapist can listen, ask the right questions, and help you see things from a new perspective. BetterHelp has over 7,000 reviews and a 4.3 rating on Trustpilot, so it's definitely a platform that you can trust. If you want to give it a try, click the link in the description or go to betterhelp.com/Jadokar to get 10% off your first month. Taking care of your mind doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're strong enough to make sure that you don't lose yourself in the complexity of life, which will allow you eventually to not stop here! Okay, let's get back to the video.
So what can I draw? What is it? Could it be, I don't know.
A rabid dog eating dirt.
Emotional, philosophical. So
What could it be? Maybe it could be about love, the sense of self. Oh, ascension, of course. This is something that we all want to some degree, an awakening of sorts that brings about the answer to life, its meaning and our purpose in the universe. It's a common theme in artwork that you can see visualized in a form of dreamlike landscapes leading to a portal to the divine. Notably derived from the religious texts that can be shown in a very literal manner or a metaphorical one, whether it's the Jacob's Ladder drawn by Gustave Doré or a moment of death depicted by Alex Gray. Now, I myself, like many of you watching probably, struggle with keeping myself on track of perpetual self-development, a growth of inner person so as to become better at living, you know? So perhaps drawing this kind of a scene and the process of a human being ascending to a higher level of being can translate over to my personal life, at least on a subconscious level, you know. And now that I'm closer to figuring out the final piece, I first would like to make a few versions of it in a sketchy manner, just to put all of these previously scribbled ideas together within a single scene. This can be done as many times as needed. You know that artists don't just gun-ho this sort of a thing. There are plenty of artworks out there that have been worked on many a times prior to finalization, and that have been reworked multiple times after the initial first piece. Immediately, I can think of two examples already. Edvard Munch's The Scream, of which there are 4 colorful ones that we know of, and the black and white lithograph version from which many prints were made, and The Isle of the Dead by Arnold Böcklin, which he painted 6 times. It's pretty interesting to look at your artwork this way, knowing that you can rework it as many times as you like, further adding details or reducing them depending on your mood and your temperament at the time. The point is that nothing is or should necessarily be static. That way you can feel a little bit more relaxed about your work without trying to nail it from the very first attempt. Speaking of which, aha! Me think me likey this one! Out of the 3 that I just sketched, and in fact, I like it so much that I won't even bother sketching the 4th one. Let's just go with this one and see how it'll develop. So far in this video, I've gone through different methods of expression, different subject matters that mostly derive from real life. Although you might have noticed a few examples that leaned more into a dreamlike environment, surreal if you will. And I think it's worth mentioning that aspect of complex art, which is the ability to bend reality to your whim, breaking the laws of physics, opening up doors and portals to new worlds and dimensions. This is what I am trying to illustrate in my piece as well, as a figure is trying to ascend up the stairs, crossing the bridge in a literal and perhaps metaphorical manner, over and up towards a doorway guarded by 2 very illustrious entities, which lead us into the light outside of this vast and dynamic environment full of winds and infinite waters. Now you also might have noticed it by now that I'm borrowing a lot of inspiration from a certain surrealist painter's skill and technique. Dali.
Dali, 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 Dali. You have to remember.
Now, when it comes to executing complex ideas and ephemeral dreamlike landscapes, I have yet to see another painter come close to this level of detail, radical approach, and weirdness. It's one thing to be able to illustrate your dreams the way you see them, but to go further and manipulate your visions into a clearer and more detailed image is a skill that's above the norm. And I think that combining the inner visions, emotions shown with an expressive manner of drawing, clear and readable subjects assembled within a single piece to show movement towards an ideal, that's what makes artwork complex. Not just the level of detail in your drawings or the manner in which you draw your subjects or the amount of subjects within your piece, but all of these elements combined together, multiplied by time plus attention. If I could draw a formula, Something like this, maybe. I don't know. My calculations may or may not be off, so please feel free to peer review this. Either way, as I am finishing the last few marker strokes, rounding up the details a bit, here I present to you my humble piece inspired by the idea of complexity. Ascension. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, please like, comment, subscribe, and share this video with anyone you like. Your teacher, your parents, parents of your teacher. Gather a family meeting to discuss this topic, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye!